If you are going to graduate college soon, if you've already graduated college recently, or if you're gonna graduate college at all, watch this video because I am going to save you so much time, money, and energy, hopefully. You guys, it has taken me 8 months after I graduated to find a job in my field. Oh my gosh. I saw somewhere that the average college graduate gets a job in their field between 3 and 6 months. And I'm sure there's all kinds of statistics like this is how long it takes college graduates to get a job out there. But I saw that one and I was like, oh wow, okay, so it's 6 months already. I still don't have a job. So actually, I thought this video was super fitting to film because tomorrow is my very first day at my very first job in my field. Woo! Oh my gosh, I'm so excited. And I was thinking about it and I was like, wow, it has been 8 months since I graduated. And to be honest, I hadn't started applying until a few weeks after I graduated because I wanted some downtime, but I should have started applying like immediately, but whatever. But even so, it's been a very long time since I graduated and it has been constant chaos of applying, interviewing, being rejected, applying, interviewing, rejection. And it's just something that can be avoided, I think. So let me give you some tips and tricks, what I did wrong, what you can do better in order to get a job sooner than later. Also, I worked in food service and retail up until this time, and I've also been jobless up until this time. So I'm not saying I haven't worked in 8 months, I just haven't worked in jobs that require a degree in 8 months. So I've worked in jobs that I could have literally gotten if I didn't go to college is what I'm saying. So that was good. Like having a job was good, but it was definitely not what I wanted, of course, because that's the whole reason I went to college and worked so hard was to get a job in something I want to do. But anyway, that's just a little rant. By the way, this is like the earliest I filmed a video. I still have my coffee going. I have barely any makeup on. We are not dressed. And I thought this would be a good cozy talk moment. So let's get into it. My number one tip for getting a job after you graduate college is definitely make sure you have tons of experience. Well, it doesn't have to be tons, but make sure you have maybe more than you think you need. And you've probably heard this before, but it is so real. I thought I had ample experience in the field I'm working in. By the way, my field is in nutrition. So I thought I had ample nutrition experience, but then I go to apply and I get through the application, the callback, the interview, maybe even a second interview. And then at last, they're like, oh, you don't have enough experience. Why do we do all this then? That is what happened to me over and over and over again, is that I would get so far in the interview process and I would think, this is it, this is the job. And then they come back and they say, oh, I'm sorry, we've moved on to other candidates. And then I ask why, and it was always the experience. And of course, they have candidates who have way more experience than me, who have way more years on me, just got out of college, have like no outside of college experience, you know what I'm saying? So I'm competing with a lot of candidates who definitely are more qualified than a college graduate, but you can help mitigate that by having more experience in your resume. And some people get really lucky and they just land the first job that they apply to and they have, you know, some experience or maybe very little experience, but they just lucked out and they got an awesome job first try and now they're set because now they have that on their resume. But for me, it took me 8 months to get a job with what I thought was enough experience, but that's that. So yeah, that's the biggest thing. Also, if you could get not just more experience, but more diverse experience depending on your field, then employers typically like that because it shows you're well-rounded, you know things, you know a lot of different things. So yeah, that's the biggest thing. And number 2, this isn't always the case, and I know you've heard this before, is to make sure your resume looks good, it's organized, it's formatted in a good way. The problem is there's not one right way to do a resume, so kind of going in blind here. But I'll show you mine right here. It is 2 pages actually. I just rocked and rolled with the 2 pages this whole time and it seemed to do fine. I got, like I said, so many callbacks, so many interviews, and it just ended up being experience for me for the most part. But I think this resume worked really well. It's really simple. It gets straight to the point, education, employment, and then some of the other extra stuff that some people might like to see. The other thing is so many job applications, they say, okay, submit your resume, but then they have you fill out literally everything that's on your resume again. And your resume is just skimmed. 99% of the time, maybe 100% of the time, they just skim it. They don't actually read it until maybe further down the line in the application process, or even maybe they never really read it. But the point is, that's the first impression, the organization, and the list of what is most important to least important. Like, of course, you don't want to put volunteer activities up at the top, or you don't want to put like awards up at the top. It's usually education and work experience at the top, and blah, 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 blah. It depends. There's so many ways to do it. I'm sure there are better mentors for resumes than me out there, but just as a little hint, that can be a big problem. If you're just not getting callbacks, if you're not getting interviews, it may be a resume problem. And another thing is, number 3, now this kind of goes with what I said earlier, to be honest, but this really hit home. When my professor said this, I was like, oh my gosh, that's so true. But shout out to my professor for this tip. You don't just want work experience, you want paid work experience and not just volunteer experience. Because, and my professor put it like this, that when you are volunteering for work and you show up late, it's always, oh my gosh, I'm so glad you're here. Thank you so much for coming and volunteering your time. But when you're paid to work somewhere, if you're late, if you're not punctual, then it's more like, why are you late? And then if you don't do a good job in paid work experience, then you're fired. You get warnings, you're reprimanded, whatever. If you don't do a good job when you volunteer, if you do a subpar job even, they're just gonna be like, oh, thank you so much for volunteering your time. We really appreciate it. You know what I mean? So paid work experience definitely has more merit to it than volunteer, although volunteer experience can be really, really important in some fields, especially healthcare. But paid work experience is where it's at. And also you get paid as you're going through your college studies. Why wouldn't you want to do that? But yeah. Then my third tip has to do with interviews. And this can be super daunting for some people. And it definitely was for me until I just had to do 10 million of them because nobody would hire me. So I just kept doing interviews. And practice really does make perfect. If you can, now here's the big tip here. This is number 4, by the way. If you can anticipate some kind of questions that they're gonna ask, definitely plan your answers if you can. Now, a lot of things though, it can be really hard to plan, especially if you have to answer some scenario questions like, what would you do if this happened? Or what would you do in this scenario? But you can plan some responses. Like, I know a lot of people in my field will say, describe a problem you successfully solved in the past. And that's something that you can plan yourself before you get into that meeting room and your mind goes blank and you're like, oh my gosh, it's so silent. I've freaked out definitely a couple times. Like, my mind just goes blank and I have to sit there for a second. That's the other thing. You can pause and you don't have to like fill the room with words 24/7. Not 24/7, but you know, the whole interview. That's fine. In fact, it's probably better to think than to just blurt out something, you know, definitely better than that. So try to plan your answers. Lots of common things are like, tell me some strengths, tell me some weaknesses. But some people might build on that though, like tell me a successful work experience you had or whatever. You know what I'm saying? If you have to, think about broad things they may ask, and then if they ask more specific, you can tailor it in the moment. It's really hard to think on the spot, I know. But really, practice makes perfect, and if you can plan your responses, then do it for sure. Also, of course, dressing well, being nice, being friendly, maintaining eye contact. Also, having questions at the end. Always have questions, because it shows, even if you really don't have any questions, think of something that you can ask, because it shows that you're interested and that you want to know more about what this company is, or you want to know more about the job, you really want it, whatever. Always have questions. That's really easy. And then thank them for the interview, thank them for your time. They usually thank you for your time, at least in my experience. But then you can say, oh, thank you for having me and interviewing me, and I look forward to hearing back soon. Oh, I always like to ask, like, if this was successful or not, will I hear back from you via email or phone number? When and how should I hear from you, basically? Because I always like to know how long I'm gonna wait and where I should be paying attention if they call me back or email me back. That's usually a good question. That usually tells them, you know, you're interested and you're waiting for them to respond to you. Yeah, so I didn't realize it, but I kind of covered the resume, interview, and what else? Oh yeah. So I didn't realize it, but I kind of covered the application, resume, and interview portions of the job application process. And those are really what you gotta focus on. Those are my tips in those 3 areas of getting hired that I would suggest have been most successful. Most successful for me, and things that I definitely would have done differently if I could go back. It was really just the work experience thing for me is what I would do if I could go back, because that's a real hindrance. And people don't really tell you that when you're in college and when you're in high school. They don't say, okay, by the way, you're gonna need some experience in work if you wanna get hired after this. Maybe this advice is really general, but I hope it helps somebody out there save some time, money, energy, because That's just no fun to be waiting and waiting and waiting. Let me tell you. Oh my gosh. But yeah, now we're smooth sailing. Tomorrow's first day. I'm so excited. I hope you find a job soon. If you haven't, I hope you found a job already and you're just curious what this video is all about. I'm gonna drink the rest of this. Thank you so much for watching. Goodbye.